For Famidaily, I have a very tightly defined set of games I'm going through. Commercially released, officially licensed, Famicom cartridges. But just because I stick to those standards for the daily videos, doesn't mean that I don't like to dip into other topics from time to time. Bandai's DATAC system violates that third condition. They're not Famicom cartridges. They're cartridges for Famicom expansion hardware. But the 7 games for the platform were commercially released, and they even carry the Famicom family logo, so they were licensed. And so I decided to make some bonus episodes when I reached the release dates for those games. Bandai has always had a fondness for specialized hardware on the Famicom. They are a toy company, after all, who had plenty of experience with making their own electronic toys, and even made a console. The purpose of the DATAC hardware is a bit hard to pin down. It seems to be a bit of a mix between trying to squeeze a few more drops of blood out of the stone that was the Famicom in 1993, reducing cartridge manufacturing costs by offloading some things to the system itself, and adding some peripheral hardware. The initial DATAC hardware did okay-ish. Roughly 300,000 systems were sold. But everything after that flopped hard. And as such, there's not really anyone talking about how and why they decided to make it. We know that all the games were developed by Tosei, and all of the games were released in a space of 18 months. Also, about half of that library easily ranks among the rarest things that you can buy for your Famicom. If you thought Gimmick and Rekka were expensive, then you haven't tried to price some of the DATAC cartridges. At the time, DATAC cartridges were significantly cheaper than Famicom cartridges due to many of the chips being offloaded to the DATAC station itself. But these days, there's really only 2 DATAC games that you can find cheaply. One of the big selling points of the DATAC was that it had a built-in barcode scanner. That's because Epoch's Barcode Battler was enormously successful at the time. It was a standalone electronic toy that lets you scan barcodes from products, and it would interpret those as stats for a battle. To take advantage of that barcode reader, most DATAC games came with a deck of cards that would represent popular characters that you'd scan in. Besides the cards in the box, and anything you scanned in from your shopping, it was very common for the DATAC games to have hidden characters, and scanning the barcode from the box, which would mean tearing up the box, would unlock one of those. One problem with the barcode reader, it doesn't really work. Now, it might be because I'm using 30-year-old hardware, but I had a ton of trouble getting it to read my cards. It took a lot of swiping to get it to trigger some things, and getting it to read barcodes that weren't on the cards was even harder. It's really not a great system to use. The pack-in game that came with the DATAC system was Dragon Ball Z Gekitou Tenkaichi Budokai. Most DATAC games will have a license attached to them because that's the kind of company Bandai is. Dragon Ball Z is of course the story of Goku, a sci-fi bounty hunter with a death wish who has jazzy space adventures. The Tenkaichi Budokai of the title is a fighting tournament that regularly occurs in the series, and many of the Dragon Ball Z video games use that as part of their title, even in the US. And this one is a fighting game. Yes, a fighting game where you have to scan in cards for your characters. From the title screen, you can choose to go into the game mode, or you could activate the barcode scanner. The barcode scanner just tells you what the results of a given code are. So it's a way that you can check out what characters your soup might be before you try to drop it into a game. For the actual game mode menu, you can choose between a 2-player battle, a 4-player battle, or an 8-player tournament. Confusingly, there's no single-player option here. To do that, you have to start up a 4-player or 8-player mode, and then after scanning your card as the first player, you hit B to cancel all of the other scans. Under the Options menu, you can change how many rounds of battling will occur, select the duration that you'll fight, and choose one of 3 difficulty levels for the AI. Once all players have scanned a fighter in, eventually, it's time for them to fight. And here, it's a pretty standard fighting game. Up jumps, press back to block, A kicks, B punches. You can also hit A and B at the same time to use your character's special move. This drains their BP, and once it gets too low, you won't be able to use that move again. On some stages, you'll fly freely around if you hit up, or you can take to the sky by tapping up twice. Naturally, HP is your health, while DP is your defense, and both of those go down when you're hit. As your DP is depleted, you'll take more and more damage. It's a system that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and also doesn't really work very well. In the one-on-one matches, and in the 8-player tournament, if the fight clock runs out, then both players have an opportunity to scan in an item card, which will usually restore some of their stats. The 4-player mode is more of a survival mode, and so when time runs out, it just switches over to another fight, with no one getting anything restored. In the large tournament, your stats are fully recovered after every fight. When you're in the final round, the time is infinite. Someone has to win. In the 8-person tournament, if you're playing by yourself and win, then you'll be challenged by one of the big villains from Dragon Ball Z. The first time through it'll be Frieza, and if you defeat him, and then do the tournament again, you'll have to fight Cell. Their stats are, to put it mildly, absurd. The best strategy I found, and I never did win, was to blast them away with your special abilities, and then hopefully survive long enough so that you could recover some power. It also helps to have a strong character. As a fighting game, Dragon Ball Z Gekitou Tenkaichi Budokai is, not good. Part of the problem comes from one of its core mechanics, scanning those cards. Goku's stats can wind up being 10 times stronger than some characters. If you find the right fighter, or happen to have been given cutouts from a 1992 Famitsu magazine that had barcodes for extra strong versions of everyone, then you'll have a much easier time. You'll be downing opponents in just 1 or 2 punches. If you don't have a strong card, though, you're just going to be chewed up and spat out. On top of that, the flow of the fights just doesn't feel very good. I'm not a fighting game guy, so I can't really describe it especially well, but with only 3 moves that you can perform, there's just not a lot of options for you. And it's possible to lock somebody into a loop. There's even special moves that just lock somebody out for 10 seconds. Either they're not allowed to move, or you can't be hurt. It's a terrible design idea. What special move a character has is also determined by the card, which means that you'll also need a good one of those. This just isn't a fun fighting game. In Japan, this game is mainly remembered for being a curiosity, notable for how it's associated with a weird peripheral rather than being a good game. Though, from what I've seen, modern Japanese retro gamers have just as much trouble getting their JTAGs to read barcodes as I do. At the time, there was a contest associated with the game. There were some special barcodes that wouldn't give you a fighter or an item to use in battle, but would instead give you one of the Dragon Balls. You'd also get a small code with each one. If you found all 7 Dragon Balls, then you could mail in the 7 codes that you received to Bandai and get a special gold JTAG card. From what I can tell, these cards are incredibly rare. I can't say that this was an auspicious start to my journey through the JTAG, but with 7 games and 6 special JTAG episodes, you'll understand why the 7th is missing when I get to that point. It's a weird side story to the Famicom's final days. Maybe we'll find one of these games that actually use the technology well.